Tennessee Homestead. How are you today? Today we're going to talk about pasture management. We've talked about how to build your soil with your cover crops and so forth. Let's talk a little bit about pasture management. Because see, in nature, these grasslands of ours were formed by having the grass there, and then bison would come through, and elk and deer and assorted herding animals, and they would go through and graze that, being pushed by predators. So they were always moving, okay? And didn't really get to eat it down to the dirt kind of thing. Constantly being driven forward. That is how you manage your pastures. Okay, I don't care if you got 2 cows or you've got 200, 400 cows. Okay, mob grazing can be done at any of those levels. It's just how much you're going to give them to eat that day. And if you hang around to the end of the video here, I'm going to tell you how to do that. But they deposit fertilizer. About 50 pounds of it falls out of their rumps every day. And you want that dispersed throughout your ground there. They do a great job pruning back your cover crops and getting it ready for the next group to come through. And I frequently would run goats in with the cattle. Most people think, oh, they'll compete for the grass. No, goats, if they've got weeds to eat, they seem to prefer it. Okay, they will graze on grass, but they really prefer getting into the weeds. Here we go. So it helps on weed control. So a lot of times if you've got goats, go ahead and run them in with your cattle. You'll find that they usually do not compete. And if you see that your cattle aren't putting on the weight the way you want, give them a little extra. You know, if the goats are putting competition on them, give them a little extra when you move them every day. Bring in sheep behind them. You know, you're going to have to move them fairly quickly because by that point your grass is getting down to that teenage size, which is about half of the adult sized grass. If you let it get stemmy and go to seed out there, now, don't get me wrong, I've done that in pastures. I've actually done that in the lawn. So my neighbors, you know, if you got close neighbors, they're probably going to complain at you. But you can do that to reseed your lawn areas to give you a nice, real lush green lawn. But when it's coming to grazing livestock on it, they usually kind of shy away from anything when it starts forming seed heads and all that. And we'll pass it by to try to get to the newer grass, primarily because the plant takes all of its cookies and cakes, you might say, and starts using that to set up that seed head. And it's not as sweet to the cattle, okay? So they'll kind of shy away from it, and then all of a sudden they're out there cherry picking things. So try to keep it from going that far. But you run your cattle in, let them do their thing. If you got some goats, throw them in there into the mix with them as they move through, and make sure when you're picking out your cover crop and your pasture mix, you know, plantain, things like that are great natural warmers. And there was one other one, I'd have to look it up to get the name of it because I've not used it, so I'm not overly familiar with it, but it's real good for goats as far as a dewormer. Save you having to run down to the local store and shelling out of your pocket for a dewormer. If you just plant it in your fields, it provides them feed and takes care of the worming situation all in one fell swoop. Okay. But if you think about it, nature had a way of doing that. They would run those large herbivores over the top of that. And if you ever look at a herd of bison or something like that, where they're grazing an area, you'll see all kinds of birds down there with them. Birds get right in behind those herds. They start going through the manures, they start all this stuff because flies will come in, especially in your summer months and so forth, and they'll lay their larvae in that cow patty. Birds will scratch through that to get to that larva. Chickens will spread that stuff around like a manure spreader, and they go after it. And it's good for chickens, it's good protein for chickens. It's a win-win. And they leave the fertilizer and the organic matter that cow just dumped out of its tush there on the ground. And now you've got fertilizer and organic matter going back into your soil. Cattle will tromp down the grass that they don't eat. Okay? Here again, you're going to start building more organic matter in your soil, because as that's been pushed a little under the ground by them hooves and laying there on the surface, here you go. Instant future organic matter for your soil. Most farms today have low organic matter, all right? Somewhere around the 1 point area, okay? Where a natural prairie, it's going to be somewhere in the 6.5 area for organic matter. Well, let me tell you something. If you're at 6.5, you have got, you've got more biodiversity in that soil than you can shake a stick at that point. All right? You have got good, healthy, living soil. And that soil is steadily moving down. Okay? Plants need minerals. They will take what they can get to at the upper levels first, and then that fungi and root structure is going to start headed down to get to those minerals. So you don't have to buy it from the co-op and have it spread around on the ground. Another thing is using cattle and goats. If they're getting minerals, that's also in their manure. So you're also kind of spreading minerals at the same time. All right? See how that all works? Those animals are a key factor in fertilization. And things like bison and cattle and so forth, they know what minerals they need, and they'll search around on the ground to find it. You'll suddenly find a rock that's got the right minerals in it, and they'll stand there and just lick the heck out of it. Today we have mineral blocks, a lot easier. But let them do what they do best. Keep them moving. Do not let them eat that grass too far down. And if you're planning on running sheep in, I would say don't let them have more than a quarter of that grass to leave your sheep something without overgrazing the pasture. Overgrazing the pasture is going to stop water infiltration. You're going to get a lot of runoff. And with that, a lot of your upper nutrients are going to run off too. You don't want that. Okay? So watch how far down that grass grows. Plus, especially if you're on smaller acreage where you're going to need to rotate those animals back onto that paddock in a fairly short time frame, the more grass you leave there, okay, the faster it's going to recover. As soon as it recovers, you can recycle them back onto that paddock again. See how you get more cow days out of your small acreage? That's how you do it. Okay? Don't let them get too crazy. You're going to feed your cattle, and you're going to keep your grass growing. That's the secret to it. The thing of it people don't understand is whenever you overgraze a pasture, that plant now goes into survival mode. And what it's going to do, if it's got, let's say, a 4-foot root down there, okay, some of that root's going to start dying out now and pulling back because it's taken all the nutrients it's got to get back in full operation on the photosynthesis. It's got to grow those leaves. So it'll let some of the root structure die out and rebuild the plant. Now, I've heard two sides of the argument. That does put more organic matter down in the soil a little faster, and you're going to get a little of that with any grazing, where that root's going to retract a little bit. You just don't want it pulling back so far that you're losing your drought protection, okay? So don't let it get too far down. Like I said, if you're running goats in with your cattle and you've got sheep you want to run in there, I'd stop it. Let them take the top 25%, maybe 30%, leave the rest for your sheep. Let them take it down to about 50% and then run them off. Keep them moving. Okay? Pretend like you're the big bad wolf. Keep them moving. All right? It's that simple. Then bring in your chickens. Your chickens will spread that manure from all those different animals all over the place. Now, here's what I found out through some vets. What it does is it messes up the pathogens in the ground, because pathogens kind of form up and so forth based on whatever species they're dealing with. So the cows come through and the pathogens start forming up. Well, we've got cattle. So they're coming up with pathogens for cattle. And then all of a sudden they find this goat manure and go, what's this? And then you're throwing in the sheep manure and they're like, what the heck? What kind of animal are we supposed to be forming up to deal with, to infect? And you throw the chickens in there. Okay? Chickens come in, spread it all over the place. In the process, they eat a lot of little microbes and so forth. Chicken's eyesight's just phenomenal. It's amazing. And seeds, weed seeds, they take those out. A lot of good comes from your chickens. Plus, you're not having to pay for feed, okay? It doesn't have to come out of your pocket. It's out there in those pastures. Chickens like the grass, okay? They're a bit of a grazing animal themselves. They don't have a problem in the world with eating some grass. So you're taking care of, now you're feeding your cattle, you're feeding your goats, you're feeding your sheep, and you're feeding your chickens primarily via Mother Nature. No outputs for you. You're not running down to the feed store every time you bat an eye. Okay, I would cut chickens back on their feed in the spring, summer, and early fall to just virtually not much of nothing. It's like, get out there and get it, girls. There's bugs out there, there's larvae out there, there's grass out there. Enjoy, because when you get back to the coop, you're not going to find 5 pounds of feed sitting there for you. They catch on pretty quick, and they do well. All right? They're healthy birds. It's a very simple process. Now that you've hung around this long, with polywire and solar chargers, this is a simple operation. You can, if your perimeter fence, let's say, is barbed wire, you just run, if it's larger cattle you're dealing with, I always use the little hook top step-in steel posts and run my polywire through that. It's got a vinyl coating on it. You get by with one strand, hook it on one fence, run it through, and hang your reel on the other. Okay? If you've got calves out there, depending on their size, you can go 2, 3, and even 4, because you can get these little snap-on clips to where you can keep hanging wires on that pole. Trust me, calves don't get through a 4-wire electrified fence. Doesn't happen. Easy to do, doesn't take you that long, okay? And they're easy to manage. Set yourself down at the end. So I had these little hooks that you could hook right on the bob wire and then hook the polywire into the other side of the hook. So when you wanted to open up a section, you cut the power off, you took it off the hooks, pulled it down. Easy, okay? Get on a reel and here you go. Piece of cake. Doesn't take long. Does not take long. And you can keep those animals constantly moving. Constantly moving. All right? You will fertilize your land. You'll build soil. Pretty soon you'll have to break out an excavator to get down to anything that isn't good, rich dirt. Yeah. You'll put groundwater back into the ground. And you'll have fields out there that if everybody's worried about if things go bad and the world stops, okay, we can't get fuel, we can't do this, we can't do that, you're covered. Everything you need is in that ground, provided by Mother Nature for not a dime. Okay? It's the reason I like the solar fencing. Yeah, keep your batteries charged. You have no problem. Okay, and I've used one battery for like 3.5, 4 years, sitting out in the fields. Yeah, so it's not that tough. It requires a little effort on your part. Okay, and yeah, like that one guy, you're going to find your cows are a bit more friendly toward you because you're out there with them. Okay, spend some time while you're there. Get to know them. All right, they appreciate it, and you'll appreciate it someday if you have to go out there and give them a quick shot or put an ear tag on them or they tore one off or something of this nature. They will hold for you. Okay, if they are very familiar with you and trust you. It's an important relationship to build. All right. Get tired of seeing these guys who think, chasing them around with a ATV, every now and again when you gotta work on them a little bit, give them a vaccine or whatever. Get to know the cows. You don't have to chase them; they'll follow you. This is Rick, Tennessee Homestead. Simple management practice. Okay. And you can keep your cows on a feed that's in the neighborhood of a 25 to, and some of the different grasses, 30% protein feed, provided by Mother Nature. Yeah. And if you're not going to do any row cropping in those areas, just let that native pasture grow. Maintain it. Make sure, check for bad spots and things of this nature. Just take care of it. You'll do fine with it. And you'll have feed, I would say probably you're going to have to go out there and throw a little seed around every 2 or 3 years. Okay? It's not hard to maintain if you got the right mix out there. That you'll have to play with to get. Okay? Once you figure out what works best on your place, it gets too simple, man. Just too simple. And if you want to put in row crops, then no problem. Get the animals off. Take a coulter packer, roll it down, and bring in the drill. You'll have a crop. Just make sure that you have plenty of clover out there when you're like doing a corn crop or something like this. It stays low to where you're not getting all tangled up in your combine with it. But, you have a live root in the ground to keep your microbial life up and going well. And it's all good, folks. It's easy. This planet has provided you all the fertilizer, all the inputs you need. It's all in the ground. You just have to get the microbiology and the system in place to get it out. You don't need to go buy it. It's there for you. Okay? Use your head and quit, like Gabe Brown says, that's one of the best things I've ever heard. If you don't, you're constantly going to be signing the front of that check to hand it to the equipment manufacturers and the fertilizer companies and so forth. But if you get your land right and you maintain a good diverse pasture land and cover crops for what you're going to be row cropping, all right, now you're down to signing the backs of the check, and that sounds like a lot more fun to me. And in this day and age, in this tight farming economy, every dollar that you don't have to spend on an input to get nutrients to your plants, that's just money in your pocket. Think on that one a bit. You can either spend your money at the fertilizer or you can keep it in your pocket. It's your choice. Now, if you've been putting synthetic fertilizers down, your ground's addicted to that, and it's going to take you a bit to wean it. Okay? Start cutting it back, get your microbiology going, and keep cutting it back until you'll find you don't need it anymore. Mother Nature's taking over, and she knows what she's doing, honest. Y'all have a great day, and I hope you're having a wonderful week. We'll talk to you soon.